Good morning, everyone, and thanks for making the time to join this Sustainability in Business webinar today. This series of webinars is organised through the St Albans Greener Together network. If you would like to join our network, please do so through the links on the screen. If you would like to be showcased in future webinars, please do also get in touch. The Greener Together network empowers and enables residents, community groups and businesses that operate in the district to come together to create a more environmentally sustainable future. We do this by creating networking opportunities, running webinar series and community discussion events. We encourage members to share their best practices, and we promote this on our website and on social media to help to share the knowledge. Currently, we are also running a One Action Together campaign to show the cumulative impact of everyone taking individual action. The focus of today is on sustainable practices to attract customers. And we have Lawrence from the Carbon Trust and Nichola from Campbell Solutions. Lawrence is the sector lead for transport and logistics at the Carbon Trust. In his role, he works with businesses of all sizes and geographies, helping corporations achieve their net zero goals and assisting startups in developing sustainable business models to create competitive advantage. He collaborates with innovation and acceleration teams to advance the mission of reaching net zero. Nichola is the head of HR for Campbell Solutions and has been at the helm of creating business initiatives and operations strategies, fostering employee alignment with the business model and corporate goals, and overseeing human resource management. I'll now hand over to Lawrence from the Carbon Trust, who will lead the next section.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Nichola. And just as my slides load up, so just a quick, as Nichola said, I'm working at the Carbon Trust. I'm working at the Carbon Trust, and I'm here to talk to you, basically giving you a bit of an overview of what we're going to cover is what do we mean by ESG, and some sustainable practices to attract customers. So, and broadly, what that covers is the understanding that non-financial metrics are now being seen and have been structured in a way that companies and investors or customers are looking as reasons to buy or reasons to see that you are a company that's looking towards the future and potentially someone that's worth investing in, or has the same values that they do. And so we'll look at the growing demand of the non-financial aspects that investors and customers are looking for their setting up their business. An overview of how to prioritize and sort of communicate that right information, especially if you're a smaller company, because it can feel quite daunting at that time. And I think this will pair nicely to what Nicola's going to do, going through another business's journey on that as a case study. So hopefully this will nicely set the scene for that next stage. So just very quickly about the Carbon Trust. So we're a not-for-dividend company, so we have no shareholders, and we work globally across 5 continents with over 400 experts, and our goal is to accelerate the move towards a decarbonised future. So we'll be focusing quite a lot on the E side, but we do work across as well with the equitable transition. So we are also understanding the social impacts of what this economic change would look like. So it's why we're quite keen to sort of talk across this. So firstly, I think it's always worth to sort of set the scene on ESG, and appreciating that this is a most useful framework to look at it. If you're someone who's already following this, you'll know there are some potential name changes, or it's being pushed as different as resilience or sustainability in general. But the advantage of using ESG as that model is it does split the categories of these non-financial metrics, and it is worth sort of setting out here that these are non-financial metrics that companies are using to report on the work that they're doing. So just very quickly, so environmental, this one should be reasonably self-explanatory, but it's essentially looking at the factors that are looking on the natural world. And that's carbon, so obviously what we focus on, but that can also be water, land use, critical minerals, and biodiversity. And depending on the business that you have, each of these may have a different priority. And then when you think about, oh, this is it's worth thinking about this, that it is not just about sort of corporate social responsibilities. It may have been framed before, but these are actually feeding in to the resilience of the value chain, and potentially the resilience of the value chain that these businesses are working with. And then in that vein, we go through to social. So this is what, again, this is what affects the sort of the lives of the lives of humans that are part of it. So that might be, pardon me, human rights and community, potentially health and safety. So again, again, the mitigation of large accidents, or issues around their product, the effects of their products. To give you a key sort of case study of that is, for example, if we look at the case with Roundup, and then again the sort of the social issue around the chemical that was used for weed killer, potentially had an unplanned side effect around being carcinogenic. So again, it is, yes, there was an environmental issue, especially around using too much fertilizer, but then there's the social issue that causes around the potential illness around that as well. So again, a nice segue into governance. These are the factors that are inherent to the business model or common practice. So this can be around the way that the business is structured in a transparent way, how its tax structure is clear and easy to see, and policies or seen issues around corruption as well. So as you sort of see, that they're not sort of abstract concepts, but sort of key understandings of what a good and well-run business should look like. And then sort of applying that to your business. So we've pulled out some sort of five quick steps to really sort of understand to make your first steps within this approach of looking beyond a financial reporting, which you'll be more comfortable with. So we sort of set these out as, again, sort of setting ambitious sustainability goals. So I think, again, with any kind of metrics or objective setting, you want it to be ambitious, but it also wants to be rational and recognizable as well. So we'll go on to a couple of potential standards in a moment. But essentially benchmarking yourself against recognizable standards will make it easier for, again, those stakeholders interested in your business to understand the work that you're doing, and that it is benchmarked against the key goals within your industry, or recognized targets that have been aggregated by these governing bodies. Another case, and if it's something that you may have this already if you're a smaller company with external investors, is that regular reporting of course builds trust and transparency of your efforts, and it's clear that it builds trust over time. And I think, again, it's showing another way of showing alignment with your key stakeholders, either your public customers, or if you're a very public-facing business, or the investors that are looking into your business, looking into the business and trying to understand how you're looking at future growth within your business. So I think moving and nicely linked from step one around setting goals is then the certifications around that. So there are some key standards depending on the goals that you have. And so once you've set those goals, making sure that you use sort of those best practice benchmarking in terms of labeling to show that you have built that, you have done what you said you were going to do, and further build that credibility, and especially useful, again, coming into that public and investor reporting to show that the third party, it is independent and transparent. And then fourth and fifth, depending on the type of industry that you work in, a key goal that we see, especially within our business, within our segment that we look after, which is the environment, looking at key themes that can help your business. So implementing circular economy practices, that can be even within a service company. There's validity there. If we're looking at the current themes around trade uncertainty, the retention of resources, and keeping them within your supply chain and your value chain as long as possible without sort of throwing them away, can potentially become an advantage to your business. Or if that's your key product as well, again, sort of key materials that you may use within your business, it is worth looking at the sensitivities around them and potential and where they come from in the world. Certain materials, of course, coming globally, coming to the UK, it is very useful to understand what those may affect, how those may affect you. And then point 5, I think the key thing is, and really the sort of main theme of this is it's not something separate, and it's not something sort of as a corporate, but what traditionally may have been used as corporate social responsibility. It is something that will provide the most benefit by being integrated into your business, because it is essentially a resilience, a risk mitigation plan that helps back up and support your financial potential growth or your financial targets in the future. And so moving through and then bringing some of that to life, there are many target setting initiatives or global alignment mechanisms can be used. So we've got a couple here. The UN Sustainable Development Goals are very useful, and if this is the first time you've seen them, or the first 17, what I would say with this is when you're looking at your industry, there will be key themes and key goals that generally link in with them, and so it's worth prioritizing those. So when you're setting your strategy, and we'll go through an example in a moment, it's worth understanding which of those goals that you're looking to achieve are prioritized, because there's no point trying to do all 17, especially if you're a smaller organization. It is much better if you're then looking to see how your goals align across your industry, and if those are and those how relevant they are to you, and making sure that importance is carried through to your business, and using them as a focus. And so it's probably more advantageous to focus on 3 or 4 of these goals than all 17, and it will become more meaningful for your business. And then another piece here, which is on the Science-Based Targets Initiative. This is again a carbon piece, but it's one that looks to sort of set the scene of standardizing what company targets mean for transitioning to a net zero economy. And from what we've seen when we're working with organizations that have to report into investors, the science-based, having their targets validated by the science-based target is a key indicator and a key scoring mechanism when looking at those environmental, social, and governance aspects. So it's something that we see quite a lot. So it's finding those useful benchmarks across your industry, and aligning to those. And so here we go, sort of dive into a very brief example before we go through to the worked case study. But what you can see here is a little bit of that coming to life. So what they've done here is you've got your science-based targets on the left-hand side there. You've got the quantifiable reporting, which is for AG bar, where you've got where they've set out their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And so they've set up their quantitative targets as well, and they've had them validated. So again, seeing that external body recognition as part of that. And then alongside that, you've got their other social and governance key KPIs that they've selected. And again, what you've got are very clear targets, very clear. You've got quantifiable targets as well, but it hasn't covered everything. You know, this could be exhausted, but what they've done is they've chosen and prioritized what's key to their industry and their stakeholders. And then the same going through to the right-hand side here as well. Again, it's not about trying to do all 17. It's about focusing on the key goals that they have and linking them to the key performance indicators that they've set out. So again, you can see that working through. So you've got climate action there, which lines to the in the top right, the greenhouse gas accounting, as well as the responsible consumption and production. Again, so that tracking and reduction satisfies those, links into those 2 goals. And then what you've got as well is I won't go through them all, but just sort of looking, if you look gender equality, they've set out the KPIs around employee engagement and women in leadership. So again, linking through to linking those goals to tangible targets. Again, this is a good example of what good looks like. And so just a little bit more on those labels, and you saw the Science-Based Targets Initiative on the previous example, but what you've got here is a sort of a spread across industry. There's a label that we provide, which is around the greenhouse gas accounting, which is the organizational carbon footprint. It could be if product manufacturing is a key part of your industry. We also have the Carbon Trust product label, again, or for reductions around that. So you see where you have a key theme or a key challenge that your industry is facing, and you have got that third-party benchmarking and certification around that. A couple of other examples here are the B Corp, which is more of a consumer-facing and broad set across the environmental, social, and governance. If any companies here have done it before, it's quite an exhaustive questionnaire that's required to be gone through to get that scoring. But again, it's a very comprehensive. So if it's looking for more a general company doing good and shifting the needle, then again, that's a good label to use. And then there's also, for example, FSC, which is very linked towards land use, and especially with paper and packaging is very relevant. Again, one that's relevant to that industry. So again, I think so as you can see where there's definite relevance across different industries and sectors, and it's about picking the right one that rhymes with your stakeholders. And then finally, so the practical measures that we see, especially around manufacturing and resources, is but also just generally good practice around looking at your products and service, is implementation of circular economy practices. So it's looking again, but the key principle around that is looking at your business model and understanding where there can be efficiencies, understanding where you can increase or continue your value to your customer, and understanding that through the whole life cycle rather than it just being part use. And I think the other key thing to realize here is it's not just about recycling, but it's also about continuing value. A couple of examples that we have on this is and possibly even have the same thing at home when you sort of go, well, okay, I've got a pair, I've got clothes that aren't great for going out anymore, but I can use them for in the garden, or I can use them for rags, right? It's sort of that element of what can I use this material or product for before it becomes waste and it has to be reprocessed and repackaged again. And it's exactly the same principles around that. And I suppose, and understanding that, are you funding that continuing or circular use of economy? So I've been talking for quite a while, but hopefully you've been given a nice overview of sort of how you can take those non-financial elements that stakeholders are looking for, either like customers or investors, and how the process of how you would prioritize those and selecting the key metrics that are most valid for you, rather than trying to do everything. And I think it's a perfect time to then hand over to Nichola, who's going to go through that journey and that understanding that the journey and prioritization that they've done. So Nichola, you happy to take over?
I am. Thank you very much.
Brilliant.
So I'm just going to try and share my screen. Give me 1 second. Okay, so hopefully that's... Is that sharing?
Yeah, it's just popping up, but it's there we go.
Oh, we know. Okay. So my name's Nick, and I am the head of HR for Campbell Solutions. We got into the EcoVadis accreditation, not intentionally, but because we were asked for it. And I hear that quite a lot from other people that have got the accreditation, that actually their company was either bidding for work, or a customer had come to them and specifically asked them for to become accredited with EcoVadis. When you become accredited, it gives you the ability to show that you're less of a risk, because you have a comprehensive business management system in place with sustainable practices, and you operate in a rounded manner and add value to not only your customers but actually your employees, and the wider economy. So just to give you, a quick overview. Oh, I've gone too far. Let me see if I can go back. We specialise in the bespoke manufacture of cable harnesses. We work with, big companies, so companies like Airbus. We produce parts for the Mars rover, so really exciting work, and all of that is done within a Class 8 clean room, and all of our staff are trained to IPC standards. We already hold quite a few accreditations, so that's why EcoVadis maybe was slightly, I wouldn't say it's easy, because it's really, there's a massive time commitment in applying for the accreditation. But if you have things like ISO 9001 or ISO 14001 especially, you're probably, I would say, halfway there. And I'll go through it in a second. The accreditation has definitely kept us honest and helped us to see where we could improve, because you're scored across different areas, and you can see your scores and where you've maybe perhaps not done so well. It's very clear on what you need to do to improve. So we found it, even with the accreditations we found it really useful, a really useful process. So in terms of, sorry, I'm just trying to move something on my screen. In terms of what it means for you as a company, sustainability, isn't a trend anymore. Businesses, we're being asked for it. I'm sure you've probably been asked for it. Like, it's becoming more and more important. And actually, we have been in tenders and bids for things where we might have the same accreditations as another company, but actually having EcoVadis is kind of given us the competitive edge, because again, we are less of a risk, and it is about supply chain risk management as well. It gives you the ability to, sometimes you're so busy doing the day-to-day things that you kind of forget that where you are, or what kind of impact you're making. And actually, because it's set out so clearly, you can almost give yourself a checklist, so it's quite easy to make an impact with little small steps. And we'll go through what some of the small steps we took shortly. So okay, so again, the EcoVadis provides a detailed assessment of the performance within your business. So it covers environment, labour and human rights, ethics and sustainable procurement. And you're scored from 0 to 100. And it very clearly highlights your strengths and your areas for improvement. And you'll see through our journey, which I'll take you through. So we started off at silver, which is, that was with ISO 14001 as well. So we were about silver level, and then progressed to gold and platinum. And I'm going to take you through what those different stages mean. So the silver is, you've got basic sustainability policies in place. You're compliant with environmental regulations, and you maybe do some monitoring of your carbon footprint and things like your waste. Gold is you've taken it up to the next level. You've got stronger sustainability practices. You can measure the results, and you've established environmental and ethical procurement policies. You've got clear progress in reducing waste and reducing your energy use. And then platinum is, you're showing that you're industry leading. You've got comprehensive ESG reporting and with really transparent data. I think you have to upload a minimum of 2 years data. So just to make you aware, it is definitely a journey, as opposed to you go straight in. Some people might be really lucky and go straight in and become platinum accredited straight away, but for us it was definitely a journey, and it took, I don't know, about 3 years. Okay. So again, it has actually helped us reduce costs and reduce waste. We definitely try and think in a more roundabout way when things come up. So for instance, you know, you need to have a new bin now for food waste and things. Actually, instead of thinking, oh, okay, we're just gonna have another bin. Actually, we've given all the staff lunch boxes and asked them to take their waste home, and trying to reduce costs to the business, but also reduce the environmental impact of things. So it's just about when something comes up, like maybe looking about whether we could do it a different way to become more green up. Again, it definitely has helped us attract bigger clients. That won't necessarily be the case for anyone, but you can share your scorecard on the EcoVadis. The platform enables you to share the scorecard. And so companies can look you up and they can ask to view your scorecard. So it does, I would say it helps. I again refer back to what I said earlier. I definitely think that it might not necessarily win you the work, but if you're pitted against another customer or another potential supplier and you have that accreditation, you are definitely deemed the safer bet, and that's because you've shown that you're extremely well managed, compliant. You've got your business objectives, you've got your ESG objectives, and you're able to evidence that. A huge part of it is evidence, but actually most of that evidence can be found in things like your employee handbook. That covers off a fair few of the answers. It can be found in things, so you might have department heads that are producing monthly reports already on different activities. You can use things like your employee development planning, the way you communicate with your staff. So for example, employee forums, surveys, things like that. So I think I uploaded in excess of around 50 documents for our last accreditation, which is when we achieved platinum. And you do have to, you have to cite them specifically. So it's pretty time consuming. It's not one of those ones where you can kind of say, oh yeah, I can tick the box and do that. You do have to prove you're doing it, and you do have to evidence everything, which I think is good. It definitely helps with the branding. I think if you've got accreditations like this, again, companies can see you and realize that you're well run and you adhere to things. You try and go above and beyond in doing better for your colleagues, your customers, your suppliers, and it does help you stay compliant as well, which is where you want to be. I would say, in terms of looking at, to start off your journey, maybe look at where you are now, start to measure your impact, track your carbon footprint, look at your bills, look at what you're spending, maybe compare that to last year, start to produce some metrics and some data, because actually it's quite interesting once you start to look at it. The energy and water use as well, and record waste generation and recycling rates. So even when you're getting rid of things like old PCs and stuff, you can have them like responsibly recycled, and most of the time they'll give you certificates, and you can use all of that as evidence. So one of the things that we did last year was switch to LED lighting. So obviously it's a no-brainer, it saves energy and it lowers costs, but also I'm not sure if it's still there, but last year there was funding available. So I mean, it doesn't cover the whole cost, but it definitely did help. So I would look at that and whether there's any sort of grant that you can get, because that's quite useful, and it actually does save a fair bit of energy. Use recycled materials where you can, switching from from normal paper to recycled paper, looking at your packaging, office supplies, uniforms, encourage bulk shipments. So that's always a good one. And reduces it, kind of, that is going to reduce a fair bit of emissions, which is good for you and good for the environment. Minimize single-use plastics. So one of the other things that you could do is look at providing, just basic water bottles for your staff. That's a real simple measure. It seems to go down quite well, and actually that's going to reduce the plastics that you're going to have to be recycling, because they're not bringing in water bottles. We found that went down pretty well. Step 3, work with sustainable suppliers. So this is where it gets slightly difficult. In an ideal world, you would want to choose people that follow ethical environmental best practices. But if you're an SME, there is only so far you can push that. And we'll touch on that in a second, because it's definitely one of the more difficult factors of becoming accredited. So, okay. So engage employees and customers. So staff training is a big one. Making sure that they understand the best practices. You can organise green initiatives, tree planting, recycling challenges. So one of the things we do is plant a tree for every new starter, and they get a little certificate, and obviously we retain a copy of that. And that can all be used, to show that you're trying to do your best. There, communicate sustainability efforts to customers. So like blog posts and talking about what you're doing is always great. And ensure policies are in place to ensure employee health and well-being. There's actually a huge part of it between the labour and the ethics side. The employee side is a big part of it. So you're looking at making sure your employees, there's policies in place to keep them safe, to make sure they have a great work-life balance, to make sure there's training, making sure you've got evidence of communications and feedback loops. That is a big part of it. So one of the things that I think this is quite useful for as well is if you broke it down into the 4 pillars of the EcoVadis framework. If you're an owner of a business, you could take each pillar and allocate it to a person in your business, a competent person, who is able to submit, to look at what they need to do, to submit that part of the form, and then be scored. And actually, most people want to improve, and it helps give them a framework on the types of things they can be doing to improve their individual department. So it helps you keep them accountable without having to do all of the work to keep them accountable, if you know what I mean. Okay. So definitely limited influence on suppliers. It is difficult. If you're only purchasing, I don't know, £100 worth of stuff a month from a supplier, you are going to have limited influence on being able to say, actually, I think you should do this, because they're in all likelihood not going to do it. If you're a huge company, we've had people come to us and just verify that we're a real living wage employer, for example, which obviously we are, and we have done. One of the things that we found quite useful is talking to our suppliers when we have to deal with them, talking to them about the types of things we're doing. So obviously we're not in a position where we can mandate that they do these things to be able to supply to us, but we can definitely share best practice with them and talk to them and have conversations with them. Cutting waste in manufacturing. So that's always going to be difficult, but you can look at things like optimization and bringing in things. So for example, we obviously use a lot of cable, and it's stripped by hand, or it was stripped by hand. And one of the things we looked at was, cable stripping machines, which we have purchased, so to optimize the production, and it has reduced waste, obviously, because it's a mechanical thing as opposed to a hand thing, which is more open to error. If you can't always choose eco-friendly materials, there's other areas that you can look at to kind of to offset that. I think that, like, for example, the tree sponsorship, the reducing things in other ways, like the LED lighting, the water bottles, things like that. They're all nice things to do for your staff, so they benefit your staff, that your staff have got like a brighter, nicer environment. They've got, little branded things that make them feel part of the team, but actually you are helping becoming more sustainable with that. So it's kind of a win-win. So obviously we started at silver. So the thing, I'm trying to think what took us from silver to gold. I think when we started at silver, it was very much an unknown. Even though we were ISO 14001, actually the EcoVadis, the difference was quite big. So EcoVadis is, you pay to be assessed and you upload the documents, so it's time consuming for a short amount of time, whereas ISO is more, you're yearly audited by someone that comes in to audit the business, so is more expensive. I think that the difference in silver and gold for us was going back and looking at our policies. If I'm honest, like with the silver, we had everything in place to be legally compliant, obviously. But with the gold, actually, we started to look at what we could do better, what we could do more of, what could do for our team. So they're the kind of things that made the difference there. With platinum, actually, the one big thing we changed was actually going back and really looking at the reporting of what we're using and how we can, and then going back and looking at how we could reduce those, and if we've managed to reduce it. So it's more of you're then getting into looking back and then forming a strategy for how you're going to further improve. So yeah, I think that it's a journey. It's definitely been a journey for us. It's taken us a couple of years to get to platinum, and it is a lot of small improvements that have kind of built up over time. Start with the easy things and build from there. Every step it benefits, your business, your customers, and the planet, and we have definitely seen that. I would say it's well worth doing. So that is me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nick. And it was really, I thought your one on the second last slide of if we can do it, so can you. I thought it was a really nice, it's a really nice piece to end with. So obviously, if you've got any specific questions for us, please do put them in the Q&A. But otherwise, I think you've touched on some really good points. Whilst those questions come in, I've got a couple of questions I'd love for you to expand upon. I think when you sort of talk about the journey, and you talk very much about the sort of steps, and I think that's really, really good. I think if you're a company if you're doing this all again, how do you think about what worked well when assigning people or sort of getting other people involved? You talk about sort of getting stakeholders within the team. What do you think worked well, and what you'd have done differently? I think that'd be good for people to hear.
So to be honest, when we were at silver, that was me doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, when I started, you only know so much about so much, and moving from silver to gold to platinum was me getting other people involved and getting their expertise and their opinions, and looking at the sort of things they're recording for their departments. So probably looking back, I should have got people involved at an earlier stage, and perhaps it, might have been a shorter journey. But actually, I'm quite grateful it went how it went, because we've built up to it, and actually, I felt like that it has added more value to the business, as opposed to just jumping straight in at platinum and being like, oh yeah, we're great. We've got nothing to learn. Actually, I think going in at silver and building up slowly worked really well for us.
As you say, it goes back to that journey piece, and I think you also your other key takeaway on, it's just almost a minimum standard. It's not a luxury anymore. This is a minimum standard of doing business. I think it's another key. It's another key piece there. Do you see any other in your sort of role or in your business when you're applying for, what do you see as sort of a big change? Do you see any other big changes coming your way on sort of on more stringent requirements? Is there anything that you sort of see on the horizon that's like, yeah, that's going to be a bit of a changer?
There's lots in employment law, but not so much in sustainability. But even then, I mean, it obviously crosses over. You want to have, a nice, fair, safe environment for your team, so that there are going to be lots of changes that way. I think like I said, there's changes in terms of things like the waste and looking at that, and actually the increase in costs. Sometimes if you can make changes within the business, because the cost of everything is rising for most people. If you're able to take a step back and look at things and think, well, how can I not only save the business money, but actually improve things for the team and the environment, then.
Indeed, and I think that's a great answer of how it's sort of, again, it's the two are merging as it's doing good business. Very much so. So moving on, we've got a couple of other questions that have popped into the chat, and if there are any more, please do drop them in. We've got a few minutes left. So this one is for me. Is there accreditation that you can get for prioritizing the recognizable targets, such as UN sustainability goals, to be used in communication? So it's a good question. So I think it does come back to, it is quite industry specific. I think it's worth putting that back into that. So you heard Nick talking there about sort of ISO the foundations, sort of ISO accreditation, and they all do feed in, and they all feed into that credibility of the UN sustainability goals. There isn't a specific UN sustainability goal verification or certification that I know of, but it's more, if you can then link your accreditations that link with those key issues with the UN sustainability goals, it provides a lot more credibility. And EcoVadis being one of them, but the others, including sort of specific labels that are key to the industry. So I think it's, and it leads into the sort of second question that's been asked, and we'll open this one up. It's about that prioritization of which goals are key. So are there any goals that seem to resonate more with customers that can be useful for attracting more customers? So I'll give sort of answer from what we've seen, and then Nick, it'd be great for you to jump in as well. So for us, we operate with B2B and B2C, so it does depend. I think we have seen with our B2C customers, they come back to us because of our footprinting label. And that one is around reductions, specifically around reductions and how and the product specific certifications. So those goals around product reductions have been have resonated really quite well with B2C products, and then B2B goals. What has been very clear on certain industries is the SBTI goals, and I sort of mentioning that one before. It very specific industries and investors really do value that, and there is an SME pathway as well if it's something that you're looking to, again, sort of as Nick said, about starting the journey early before so it doesn't catch you off guard. Is a good one to start with if you feel you're at that stage. And Nick, do you have any others that you want to add, maybe more industry specific, that you think would be valuable?
In terms of becoming accredited?
Or sort of more goals that you've seen that resonate with your customers. So if that might even be the bids side.
Yeah, I mean, so our customers are, I mean, they're looking to see that we're a safe pair of hands. You know, there isn't a risk in their supply chain, and because we've formed quite a long part of quite a long supply chain, that's ever important, and that's why actually one of our biggest customers did ask us to get this accreditation, because that is what you're showing. So I think definitely I'm seeing more that they're customers that you do presentations before, and you talk about your real living wage employer, and you talk about your ISO 14001 and you know, your EcoVadis, and it used to be like a yeah, you know, like kind of like a tick box thing, and actually now we're getting a lot more engagement. They're asking us questions about it. They want to know what it entails, and they're more interested in, you know, the kind of things that we offer our team and our staff. So we are definitely seeing an uptake in interest, and also we're noticing that we're getting looked at more on the portal. So I think it's becoming a more, it was quite unknown. Well, no, it was unknown to us, obviously, but it was less visible when we started, and actually now we're starting to see customers actually look us up on the portal. So I think that's quite interesting.
So it's almost, yeah, the accreditation is nicely working both ways. It's also a bit of an advertising of sort of, okay, these people meet our requirements, so it's worth talking to them rather than finding them out later in the bid process. So yeah, I think that's a really nice answer of sort of like what customers are looking for, and it's a real tangible piece of how those accreditations specific to your industry can be really, really valuable. No, thank you so much for all those questions, and your answers, Nick. I think unless there's any other questions coming in the chat, I think that's not a bad place to sum up. Nichola, can I hand over to you? The last closing thought.
Okay, thank you, Lawrence, and thank you, Nichola. That's been really, really interesting today. So I'd like to thank the presenters and thank people for participating. As we're going to be sharing the recordings for these webinars on our website and sharing them with different business networks to really try and make the most of the opportunity that we've had today. And I'd just like to say, if you are interested in finding out more about the St Albans Greener Together network, then do get involved, or if you'd like to be involved in a future webinar, that's also another opportunity. And apart from that, I'd like to draw the webinar to a close today. So thank you very much, and we hope to see you again.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.